Hi, welcome to Chapter 2.2 of AICE International History. So, the central question for this unit is how and why did international tensions remain high in the period between 1920 and 1923? So, the subunits for this unit include 2.2a, which talk about the crisis and tensions, 2.2b, which talk about the aims and impacts of international treaties and conferences, and 2.2c, which is talking about changing relations between major powers. Here's the vocabulary for this unit. The first is fascism, which is a political philosophy which advocates state control over all aspects of society and the economy and is heavily nationalistic. A pact is a formal agreement. It could mean a treaty between two or more countries, as in the case of the Rapallo Act, or an agreement to recommend a course of action. A Comintern, also known as as the Third International or Communist International, was a communist organization founded in Moscow in 1919. It aimed to encourage worldwide communist revolution. So 2.2a. Making the peace treaties was hard, but enforcing was even harder. The US Senate's rejection of the peace deal made more tensions with Britain and France, and Russia was left out and isolated because countries feared communists. Mussolini's rise in Italy and his defiance of the peace agreements added new problems in Europe. Now let's talk about US isolation. Many Americans disagreed with Wilson about joining the League of Nations, and Republicans wanted the US to avoid foreign issues unless its interests were involved. Senator Borah warns that the treaty would threaten Americans' freedom. The Senate rejected the treaty and chaos isolation instead. France felt unsafe without the US help, and Britain focused more on its empire. Britain wanted disarmament, but France feared a stronger Germany, and France was left isolated and determined to keep Germany weak. Regarding the attitudes towards Russia, the communist Russia was feared by most other nations. Many countries worried revolutions would spread across Europe because of it. Western powers joined the Russia Civil War to stop Lenin's forces. France lost a possible ally, and Russia became even more isolated. These fears made Europe more tense after the war. Now let's talk about German hyperinflation. The US demanded repayment for its wartime loans to Europe. Countries depended on Germany's reparations to pay their debts, and Germany said it could not afford to pay, and its economy collapsed. The German mark lost all value, and prices for food scarce. The government printed more money, making inflation worse. Regarding the Ruhr crisis, France and Belgium invaded the Ruhr after Germany's missed payments. Germany workers refused to cooperate, stopping production. The shutdown made Germany's economy much weaker, and inflation grew worse, and Germany could not repay its debts. Britain and France clashed over how to treat Germany, and Britain wanted Germany to recover for trade. France wanted Germany to stay weak for safety, and Britain saw France's actions in the Ruhr as too aggressive. Regarding the Corfu incident, Italy's economy suffered after the war, causing job losses and unrest. Mussolini's fascist party gained support by opposing communism. The king made Mussolini prime minister to stop more chaos. Mussolini wanted Italy to took Fiume and invaded Corfu after Italians were killed. The League of Nations told Italy to leave, but Mussolini refused. Its aggression worried other European countries. Other disputes and tensions included new border disputes, which appeared in Europe. Turkey ignored the Treaty of Sevres and took back land in 1922. The Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 returned land and rebred Turkish pride. Turkey's success encouraged others to challenge the peace deals, and Japan's growing power in Asia worried the USA and Western nations. The Washington Conference from 1921 to 1922. So the USA held a meeting to reduce tensions in East Asia, and the nine nations agreed to limit their navies and avoid war. The Five Power Treaty reduced warships and limited Japan's heavy navy size. The Four Power Treaty made countries settle disputes peacefully. The Nine Power Treaty protected China and supported equal trade. These treaties lowered tensions but were weak and reward punishments for breaking them. 2.2b The aims and impacts of international treaties and conferences. Even though tensions in war were high, no nation wanted another war, so countries tried to improve relations through meetings and treaties. The Washington Conference from 1921 to 1922. So the USA saw rising conflicts in East Asia from Japanese expansions and invited nine nations to Washington to reduce naval tensions. The major powers discussed limiting their navies, while other nations focused on issues in East Asia. Several treaties were signed that seemed to protect peace in the Pacific. The four power treaties. So, USA, Britain, and Japan agreed to respect each other's territory in the Pacific and settle disputes through negotiation. This treaty also ended the 1902 alliance between Britain and Japan because it no longer made sense for Britain. The Five Power Treaty. Japan agreed to leave some Chinese land and reduce its navy while all five powers set limits on their warships. In exchange, Western nations promised not to build new naval bases near Japan. The Nine Power Treaty. China's all nine nations promised to keep China safe from invasion and follow the open door policy for equal trade. This treaty was meant to protect peace in East Asia, but had weaknesses. The treaties lowered tensions but lacked enforcement and left loopholes, like allowing cruiser ships. The American Army and Navy Journal said the treaties put the USA at risk because such agreements often failed. A Japanese businessman said Japan should have been treated equally and that the USA was unfair. William H. Gardner argued the treaties actually helped navies become more efficient by removing old ships. Okay, now let's talk about the Genoa Conference in 1922. 30 European countries met in Genoa to fix economic problems, including how Germany could pay reparations. Britain wanted Germany's payments reduced, but France demanded full payment and tried to block the conference. The conference mainly focused on reparations and the economic collapse in Germany. The meeting failed because the USA didn't attend and France refused to compromise, and Germany and Russia walked out. The Rapallo Act in 1922. So Germany and Soviet Russia, both isolated after the war, continued talks after Genoa and improved relations through agreements. They signed the Treaty of Rapallo, canceling past claims and agreeing to cooperate economically. Germany secretly rebuilt banned military equipment, and this worried France and Poland, who feared a strong German-Russian partnership that threatened their safety. Now let's look at 1923's the Treaty of Lausanne. Turkey rejected the unfair Treaty of Sevres, and talks in Lausanne were needed to solve border disputes. The negotiations were tense but ended with the new treaty recognizing Turkey's independence and new borders. This showed that the Paris peace settlement could be challenged and changed under certain conditions. 2.2c Aims and impacts of international treaty and conference. Changing relations between major powers. So, after the war, many countries faced economic disasters, debt, inflation, and social problems, increasing international tensions. Europe struggled to rebuild industries, repay American loans, and deal with unemployment. These hardships made countries more worried about revolutions. So, let's talk about the fear of communism. The Bolshevik takeover in 1917 scared Europe because Russia was punished for the worldwide communist revolution. Communist groups met in Moscow in 1919, making Europe fear a spread of revolution during a time of chaos. Even the USA people had a red scare because people feared communist influence and unrest. By 1921, Russia accepted its needed peaceful relations, and Britain signed a trade treaty recognizing Bolsheviks. France still hated the Bolshevik government for leaving World War I early and refusing to repay debts. Impact of decisions taken by the USA. So the USA refused to ratify the Treaty of Versailles, weakening the peace terms and damaging the League of Nations. France felt unsafe because the USA's refusal let Britain cancel its promise to defend France, and the USA demanded repayment of wartime loans from Britain and France, which increased financial pressures. Britain and France needed German reparations to repay these loans, but Germany could not afford them. Britain wanted to compromise with Germany, but France demanded full payment. Now, lastly, let's look at the French attitudes towards Germany. France wanted Germany permanently weakened because Germany had invaded twice in 50 years. France insisted on high reparations to keep Germany economically weak for decades. When Germany fell behind on payments, France occupied the Ruhr in 1923 to force payment. The occupations worsened Germany's inflation and hurt trade relations with Britain, making France feel even more isolated. Thank you for tuning in to Chapter 2.2, and in the next video, we'll be looking at Chapter 2.3. Thank you.